Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Kontrovers and I'm Vice Director of the IKKS, the Institute of Competence, Communication and Languages. And I'm delighted to welcome you tonight on behalf of the Institute, the International Office, represented by my dear colleague, Dr. Julia Köhler, who will be responsible for the social media discussion tonight, and quite generally, Mittweida University of Applied Sciences. The panel discussion that we are hosting tonight is part of the third international week at our university, which is entitled Strengthening European-African Partnership, Challenges and Opportunities. For tonight, we will be narrowing the topic a little bit down when we talk about Africa's young future turning potential into perspectives. Maybe one or two words about the format. We will have a panel discussion with our guests first, then we'll open up for questions from our live audience. Yes, actually we have a live audience tonight, which is a very, nice feeling again. And then last but not least, my colleague Julia Köhler will collect questions from the YouTube chat and read them to our guests. So you are very welcome to contribute, to ask questions, to remark, to comment. And if you want to ask questions directed at a specific guest, please note that in the chat too. Africa is a young continent, not with regard to its history, but rather in terms of demographic composition. In 2020, approximately half of the population of Africa was younger than 20 years old, compared to about 21% in Europe. The challenge for African nations, but also for a mutually beneficial African-European partnership then, will consist of improving prospects for young generations of Africans and Europeans. When Julia and I prepared this panel discussion with our guests, we were oftentimes talking about a speech that the former German head of state, the former Bundespräsident Horst Köhler, gave in November 2017. Köhler was referring to giving African youth a perspective as die unterschätzte Menschheitsaufgabe, the underestimated task of mankind. Köhler quoted a study of the International Monetary Fund that until 2030, about 18 million jobs will have to be created yearly in Africa, to absorb the number of youth entering the job market. As the Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, Gerd Müller, stressed in his welcoming remarks this morning, Africa is now facing a severe recession, and most African countries do not have the resources to finance the massive economic stimulus programs that the US or European countries can finance. And this is only one aspect of the pandemic. As Müller also stated this morning, only 2% of Africa's population has been vaccinated. 1/3 of all developing countries have not received a single dose of vaccine. The pandemic has been a burning lens for existing inequalities and discrimination. So when we go back to Köhler's speech, the situation is even worse now. But I think that the three different realms that Köhler mentioned in his speech, where prospects are needed, are still very valid. They include the economy, opportunities for gainful employment, the political system, robust democracies with opportunities for participation, especially for women and youth, and identity formation processes. In the discussion we had prior to this evening, we added the healthcare system, and it is not so much about COVID-19 here, but about malaria, an area that our graduate students specializes in, and HIV, especially in Southern Africa. Fifth, we could add climate change, also an area that one of our guests specializes in, and sixth, the educational system. If the African nations are successful in improving prospects for their youth, Europe and Africa will both benefit. I don't want to be sensationalist here, but we need to address this very clearly. If not, we will probably see violent unrest and unprecedented migration movements. Having said this, we want to focus on a constructive approach here, discussing both the chances and the challenges, the potential and the problems. We have invited competent guests for this panel discussion who I want to introduce. Our first guest is Dr. Gabin Ananou. He is program director at the German Aerospace Center in Bonn, in charge of the establishment of the African Climate Competence Centers, which are a joint initiative of the Federal Republic of Germany and 16 countries in Western and Southern African regions, responding to climate change. He was ambassador for Togo, and if I'm not mistaken, he is the youngest ambassador ever to serve in Germany. Is that record still valid? Yes, it is, okay. Dr. Ananou got the Doctor Honoris Causa from the Federal University of Technology in Akure in Nigeria for his tremendous engagement for the development of Africa, and is Associate Professor for International Cooperation and Climate Diplomacy at the University of the Gambia. On a day like this, it is also important to note that one of his three sons, Frederick Ananou, played for the German national team of junior players under the age of 20 and is currently under contract in the second Bundesliga with SC Paderborn.
Exactly. Thank you.
Dr. Ananou, welcome. Our second speaker is Dr. Hedwig Ngwa, who holds a PhD in Gender and Developmental Studies, as well as the master's and bachelor's degree in Geography. She is a geography teacher at Government High School Great Sopobuea. Furthermore, or rather at the same time, she is part-time lecturer of Gender and National Resource Management in the Department of Women and Gender Studies at the University of Buea, and part-time lecturer of Gender and Local Governance at the National School for Local Administration in Buea, Cameroon. Hedwig is a civil rights activist who is doing a lot of work in several NGOs and associations, especially focusing on gender, environmental, and developmental issues. She is the author of the book A Gender Perspective on Municipal Solid Waste Generation and Management in the city of Bamenda, Cameroon in 2019, which shows the overlap of questions of gender and the environment. Join me in welcoming Dr. Hedwig Ngwa from Buea, Cameroon. Our next speaker is Nesma Adil Yusuf, who is a master's student at our university and a PhD candidate at Chemnitz University of Technology. Mrs. Yusuf was born and raised in Sudan, but also attended AIMS, the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences in Limbe, Cameroon, which is only, as I get it, a few kilometers away from Buea. Mrs. Yusuf works in Mittweida in Professor Christian Schneider's group on infectious disease epidemiology and global health. She has been awarded a scholarship by the MasterCard Foundation and the DAAD, and recently co-authored 2 papers on the COVID-19 pandemic, and also presents a poster on the subject, as I heard here in the International Week. Her research interests include mathematical biology, epidemiology, oh, that was a good one, epidemiology, very difficult word, and global health. Please welcome Ms. Yusuf. Last but not least, let me introduce our fourth guest, Professor Dr. Andreas Wrobel-Leipold, who is Professor of Media Management here at our university and Dean of Studies of the Master's Programs, Media and Communication Science. He wrote his master's thesis on developmental help of the Soviet Union and China in Africa and completed his PhD in political science with a book entitled Konflikt und Massenflucht in Tropisch Afrika, which translates roughly Conflict and Mass Exodus in Tropical Africa, published with Peter Lang. Professor Wrobel-Leipold worked and studied numerous times in West and East Africa, and additionally I can tell you that he is my partner in crime as we jointly teach the module Cultural Studies in the BA program Global Communication in Business and Culture. Welcome, Professor Wrobel-Leipold. You know, when I talk to my students, I very often refer to a quote from the African-American philosopher, theologian, and activist Cornel West, who said, whenever you talk about something, whatever this is, historicize, contextualize, and pluralize. And here we are talking about Africa, as if this was a very homogeneous entity or something. So I want to start the discussion in asking Dr. Ananou, when you think about the countries you work with or also you have expertise in, what are the challenges they face? Do you agree with also with Horst Köhler's observation on the most important challenges and issues there?
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this event. I'm very delighted to be here and also to share with you my expertise and my knowledge about this wonderful continent. I born myself in West Africa, and Africa is a big place. It's a little bit difficult to pretend having enough skills and to talk about the whole continent. So this is why I will limit my statement only on some of the countries in West Africa where I used to work and where I used to interact with people. You know, Africa is a wonderful continent, and I'm always delighted every time I get there. But the biggest challenge for people is really to go to bed in the evening and to wake up in the morning. Because between the two times, they don't know what will happen in the night. There are so much challenges. There are so much risk. There are so much disasters. And managing all those challenges every day is not an easy task, in particular for families, but also we know that women play a big role in the African society. It is not easy at all for women to manage all those risks and disasters every day. But also when you travel through Africa, you will gain a kind of hope because you will see a lot of movement going on. You will see a lot of people gaining more excitement of what the future could bring to them, because it is a continent in movement, a continent bringing everyday changes. So when you go tomorrow to Nigeria, you will see that 10 years ago, some of the development were not possible. Today, you have big roads, you have clinical services, you have transportations, you have sanitations. All those changes are coming step by step, and they are there. The same changes are to notice when you travel to the southern part of the continent. So every day, people are waking up, try to manage themselves. It's not easy, but from our perspective here, we are seeing a lot of hope, a lot of good changes. And this gives us more confidence to give more engagement and to to develop strategies at our level, but also to try to find strategies in the cooperation with our African partners to help them sustaining the situation they have or to help them developing new solutions for the continent.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Gua, when you, I see there is no Dr. Gua at the moment, so maybe Mrs. Youssef, can you relate to what Dr. Ananou just said? So the confidence, the hope for change that is coming. If you think about the countries you have lived in, Sudan and also Cameroon.
Well, for me, I'll start with saying that I really like what you said about Africa being we refer to it as an entity. We might not, like all the countries, might not have the same culture or the same background, but we share the same struggles, and we share some of the challenges. So for me, if you thought of Africa as a house, then the African countries are the walls, and the African people are the bricks. For me, the real challenge is everyone should know their place in building this house. Every brick should be put on top of the other. Every wall should be in a certain position in order to build a whole strong house. So that's, for me, I can relate to what Dr. Ananou said, because I understand that I'm coming from Sudan. It has a little, if I can say, a different culture from the African countries, because it's an Islamic conservative community. But I was very grateful, actually, to have seen another African countries. I've been to Cameroon for a year and a half, and the people might dress differently, speak another language, but the basics are there, the challenges are there. There are people starving, the job market is not as open as you want it to be. The youth are still not certain of their future. So yeah, the challenges are there, and the good thing is recently, and I can say this confidently because a recent event in Sudan that happened in 2019 was a start of a revolution. So you can see that the people are becoming more aware of what they can do, more aware of where they want to go, and more aware of what they want to achieve. So, yeah.
Okay. Professor Wrobel-Leipold, where does Europe come into play in this equation, or in this relationship with the African continent?
Well, we are in the game for at least 150 years, and most of the time we had plenty of good advice for Africans. And as it turned out, most of our advice was not as effective as we hoped. So I think we should be very, very careful in telling Africans what to do and what to leave. And we should analyze first. And our recommendations should be very, very decent. Because I think most of the problems we are facing now are due to European interference for almost 150 years. Be problems demographic, political, economic, and what else?
Okay, so when we talk about this rather, if I got you correctly, Eurocentric perspective of offering help, how could it be, Dr. Ananou, how could it be that we do not, trap ourselves in this, like paternalistic view on Africa from a Eurocentric perspective? I mean, tell us about your work, how you, on a day-to-day basis, try to really establish a mutually beneficial relationship, partnership.
Yeah, in the past, it has been very simple. We have conceived the plans, we have conceived the solutions for the challenges in Africa. We went there, we had money, enough money, and we said, okay, we would like to help you, but at our conditions. Mm-hmm. So you take it or you leave it. But today, we have a lot of experts who has been capacitated in Europe or US, coming from Africa, and they are going back to Africa to help the continent growing up. Those people, also from the young generation, they have enough capacities to find a specific solution for their own problems. Mm-hmm. So what we have changed now in our approach in the cooperation with Africa is not to design a solution for them, but to jointly design a solution with our African partners for Africa. And it is working very well. Okay. So what we do is, for example, to ask, to express their needs. What do they need to find solution for their problems, for their challenges? And in most of the cases, the responses are very simple. We need more human resources. Mm-hmm. We need more experts. We need people who are from here, from the continent, and who know about our challenges and who can help not to find directly a solution, but to define the way to a solution. Mm-hmm. And this is what, for example, the German government is doing. This is what I'm responsible for, partly in the framework for our project. We do select young scientists in Africa, and we give them the opportunity to do their PhD or to do their masters by working on very, very specific solutions for their countries. And it's working very good. And the last 5-6 years, we have capacitated about 300 students who are now in very responsible positions in the countries, in the government, developing new solutions for the challenges, but also becoming at the same time ambassadors for the Federal Republic of Germany. Mm-hmm. This is what we are doing to support the countries. We are not giving any more checks. We are not giving any more money. We are not giving any more money to some of the organizations to go and develop solutions in Africa. So we are investing now in human resources so that African partners, African young scientists are themselves in the position to develop and to find more and better solutions, specific solutions for the problems.
How does this, if I understand correctly, your special task there is developing solutions in the realm of climate change and what this means. So how does this work? You said you work with 16 universities, and there are always 2 people from, if I got this correctly, from the university. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more what the specific approach to climate change is there.
Climate change is the basic problem in the most of the West African countries. If you go to Niger, people are suffering of drought. They don't have water. This is the reason why they migrate from Niger, for example, to Mali. By doing this, they are occupying spaces which doesn't belong to them. So when they go there, the population in Mali is, for example, is angry, and this brings some conflicts in the region. Mm. The same happens between Niger and Burkina Faso. So if you go down to the coast, so where we have more water, for example, when it rains, you have water everywhere, inundation everywhere. People have to move from a place to another one. And the part of the population suffering for this is mostly the young generation. So what we do is that we propose to some of the countries joint solutions. For example, the coastal region, we know that they are suffering of coastal erosion. So all the countries having this problematic, we put them together, and we ask them to select experts who go, for example, to a specific university to get capacity building and become later experts on coastal erosion and then later develop specific solutions for the countries on the coast. If we go to Mali, we have put there a program on climate change and agriculture, bringing from each of the West African countries one expert. They go there, they get a stipend from the German government for 3 years to do their PhD in climate change and agriculture. This helped them becoming expert, and they go back after their study and help the country developing specific solutions for the country. The most interesting part of this is that one. We in Germany, we only cooperate scientifically with the highest, with the best, Japan, US, France. But now we are reversing the cooperation trend approach by also trying to work with our developing countries' partners. Because when we go now for big negotiations on climate change, they are the one coming there to discuss with us. They are the one now supporting our position because we have given them the opportunity to be capacitated and then to understand how the entire world works. So by doing this, we are helping them to find solutions for the country. We are producing experts for the governments and for the countries, and they are in the position really to find specific solutions for their own country. By the way, because it's important to mention this, you know, for example, GIZ have been working for many years in the region in Africa. GIZ is not having the same position now in the countries because GIZ is not more bringing only solutions. GIZ is going to Africa to work with African experts. We were supporting the countries in that perspective.
Thank you. Is that an approach that could help, actually, that could avoid the mistakes from the past?
Yes, indeed, it sounds very helpful. And if you said we should not just cooperate with the very high-rise technology institutions, I think it's okay. We should also put into focus that there is a very high potential as far as small and medium-sized enterprises are regarded. That's where the jobs can be created, and that's where Africans are really fit. There is a lot of initiative, there is a lot of expertise, and you don't need so much high technologies. Among African craftsmen, I found really geniuses. I remember a car mechanic in Ghana. We had no brake liquid, and he said, well, it's no problem. There is a special kind of beer which serves as well as the officially licensed brake liquid. And I don't know what kind of beer it was, but it worked. And it's a lot of practical expertise. And what these entrepreneurs need, it's not just money. What's also needed is the rule of law, that their bills are paid, that their customers are paying, that they can rely that, well, we make a fair deal. I'll give you my services, I give you my goods, and you give me the money. And if not, there is the law which will be enforced if you fail your obligations.
So basic stability, what we said as a robust...
The rule of law, yeah.
Rule of law, yeah. I see that Hedwig Ma is now with us. Can you hear us, Hedwig? Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to be back. I'm sorry for being in and out. Just one of Africa's problems. I'm suffering from power shedding, and so I'm having some shaky connections as well. Yes, I am back. I'm glad to be back. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. Dr. Nkwa, when you think about Cameroon and what we just discussed here in regard to other places, is something like a robust rule of law a basic need that also would serve Cameroon at this moment in time? When we talked in preparation of this meeting, we talked about the armed conflicts that are happening in Cameroon, or have been happening for the last few years. I guess we have some technical problems. Could you hear me, or?
No, I lost the last part of your words. Could you please just come again?
Yeah, okay. So, okay, we were talking about a robust rule of the law as something essential for developing opportunities for Africans.
Okay.
Can you relate to that in regard to your home country, in regard to Cameroon?
I will say that I appreciate what the former speakers already raised about Africa and African challenges. Yes, Cameroon, like most African countries, is also experiencing some of these challenges. Um, and that of the rule of law. Well, we are currently in Cameroon and at the moment in a political crisis. And there is need for us to be able to address this. Unfortunately, that is not happening, and that could be attributed to the lack of stations in addressing the law, and that law, which is supposed to be based on human rights and all, I'm afraid we have some of those challenges, and therefore we find ourselves in a insecurity, in a crisis. Um, at the moment, we have lots of insecurity, a lot of uncertainties, and we can't be so certain and we can talk with conviction about what tomorrow has. So truly, we are suffering from some lack or some application or inapplication of the right kind of laws. I will appreciate if you can probably rephrase or enlighten me a bit more if I got the question right, or if there's something we need much more. The connection is a bit shaky.
Yeah. Maybe you can tell our audience a little bit about the situation in Cameroon at the moment, because I don't think that everyone in Germany knows about the situation right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, about 4 years ago and running, the regions of the northwest and the southwest of Cameroon have been in a crisis, and this resulted from our history in one way or the other. Cameroon is a country of biocultures. We have descents of the French um, colonial impact, and we have those of the English. So it's a country where about with 10 regions, and about 8 regions of this country have a French culture. So we call those who are called the Francophones, and then we have the Anglophones who inherited the English culture based on the fact that there were mandated nations of the United Nations given to to um, to England and to France. So these two regions, over time, feel marginalized because of the fact that our power sharing, decision making seemed not to favor them. Also, because resource distribution, it's not equitable. And yes, there has been this tussle. And unfortunately, some 4 years back, actually in September in 2016, the teachers and the lawyers staged a protest. And this protest was asking for a redress of the situation where they feel marginalized and the need for power to be, for decision making and resources to be equitably distributed. Unfortunately, this protest was responded to by by um, by military repression, and ever since people have been to jail, and it has deteriorated from just a protest to an outright war. So at this moment, in the southwest and in the northwest regions of Cameroon, where I belong, we are having serious challenges. It is on a day-to-day basis. I remember the first speaker there said that you sleep in the night in Africa, you don't know how your morning is going to look like. Exactly that is what it is for us. Sometimes it's not always sleeping in the night and wondering whether you're going to see the next morning, but even in the course of the day, it is still very hard for us. So that is where we are as at now. Thank you very much.
When you sketch the conflict between English-speaking and French-speaking ethnicities in Cameroon now, I was wondering about the impact. Is there still so much impact coming from colonialism, or is this something we could address as neocolonialism? You also you were talking about resources and resource distribution and so on. What would you say? Is this a direct thing inherited from colonialism?
Okay, thank you very much. I would clarify the fact that the insecurity or the war that is currently raging in Cameroon is not between the English speaking and the French speaking. It is between the English people speaking and the government. So I think I would like to clarify that. And as to whether it is as a result of colonialism or it is as a result of current power dispensations, yes, it will be a combination of both. Um, by virtue of our history, there has been this high level of dependence, given that you still have the influence of the colonial past on the current governments. And these colonial powers, as we will now see in a new colonialism with the impact of, be it French Africa, be it English Africa, be it Sino-African relationships, all of that, we still have that background there. And by virtue of the way these two cultures are, one which seems to be a culture of dependence, a culture where um, I will put it like dependence on the past, where the colonies and the teachings at the time was more oriented towards serving the West, serving the colonial powers, and not serving the Indian. It means that even the mindset means that even the curricula for teachings and all of that made them to be dependent. So we can link that back to colonialism in a way. As of now, yes, we can also say that it is as a result of the current power dispensations. So the issue of equitable distribution of resources remains problematic. And it is necessary for Africans, for Cameroonians, to be able to take that responsibility. I'm going to shift a little from the fact that, yes, over the so many years, we have the influence of colonial powers. That is true. It has a long arm, but it is also about time that we, as Cameroonians, we as Africans, also take that responsibility, which is ours, to do equitable distribution of resources. I think that if our governments did that, we likely wouldn't have been where we are today. So it is not always blaming the colonial powers, but also blaming ourselves as at today as to why we are not recognizing the needs and recognizing the importance and the values of every citizen, and giving them equitable opportunities.
Wrobel-Leipold, you were heavily nodding your head, so I guess you want to remark on that.
What we can say in Cameroon right now is a twofold colonial heritage. The first part is that the borders in Africa are colonial borders. And as you might know, Cameroon originally was German administered. Then after World War I, it was divided. The smaller part was administered by the British and the larger part by the French. After independence in 1960, both parts came together. So, and now the other colonial heritage came into the game, and this is what I might call the colonization of thought. It's far beyond French fantasy that there might be one state with two languages or even two different administrations. France is strictly centralized, and it expected its colonies to act as the French are doing. So it's quite logical that the Cameroon government is against any kind of autonomy in a certain region, be it justified or not. No, it's against any principle of the French way of governing. And to give you an example of how a colonization of thought works, French were very eager to educate, in inverted commas, to educate their colonial subjects as if they were French. And this was not only during the colonial times, when in their history classes, African kids had to learn our ancestor, the Gauls, unsere Vorfahren, die Gallier. This took place up to the 80s. I remember a 12-year-old girl far in the hinterland of Benin, and she was doing her homework. She had to learn a poem by heart. And I said, "Oh, what you learning here?" "Oh, I'm learning a poem." "Oh, what kind of poem?" "Oh, Victor Hugo sur la liberté de l'âme." It's Victor Hugo about the freedom of soul. And I think philosophy is a very, very nice thing. But I think that as a rural African girl, you need other capacities and abilities than learning Victor Hugo by heart. And
Yes, Mr. Ananou, you want to respond?
What I don't understand is how the politicians are seeing the future of their own countries. So we are talking about colonialism, yes. It has caused a lot of damage. But it's long now. It's long far back. Why are the politicians, the head of state, the ministers, are not taking responsibility to do something and to develop their own country and give young people and their population a new perspective? Why are they not doing this? If we take the case of Cameroon, it's very simple. The government is happy that the ethnics, the groups are fighting among each other so that they can have their peace. They can have time. Yeah, they can have time to take all the resources and sell to foreign countries. This is a pity, but this is what is happening. It is the case in Cameroon. It is the case in Côte d'Ivoire. It is the case in Togo, where you go everywhere. But we are seeing a light of hope that the new generation coming up will not accept that anymore. This is the reason for conflicts, now political conflict in some of the countries. And the change will come if they want or they don't want. So it is time for the political leaders in Africa to take responsibility and conceive priorities, development priorities for their own country. This is not happening. It's not accepted that the French president travels to Cameroon or travels to Côte d'Ivoire or travels to Benin to tell them what they have to do. It is not acceptable that the Sahel countries cannot join their force to combat jihadism in the region, and we need the French army to come and occupy the country for many years to support them. So, but we know that Africa, the African countries, Cameroon, they have all a lot of resources, natural resources, but also financial resources to face the challenges and find solutions for the country. This is not happening. If we want Africa, if we want the countries to develop, if we want the countries to give young people good perspectives, so we need to change the whole political environment. Without peace, without democracy, any change will not be possible. This is my point of view.
Well, I agree completely with you, but it's not just politicians who are unable to learn. Sometimes citizens are unable to learn as well. I remember the fact that in the early 80s, Benin had a revolutionary government, and not everything a Marxist does is nonsense. What the revolutionary government tried to do was to change the textbooks, elementary schools and secondary schools, and they said young people should learn more about agriculture, how to fight disease. They should learn more about African reality and maybe less about French philosophy. Mm-hmm. And what the government earned was a lot of protests by teachers, by students, who considered the Africanization of textbooks as a step backward, as a step towards underdevelopment. That means they have lost their self-confidence and they have lost the pride of being Africans. And I think that's a pity.
But the problem here is just the time of the transition. Africa is in a phase of transition between the old world to the modernity. This is what we are, and the leaders must take time to plan and have a strategy how to do this. And this is what is not coming. We need to, it's not anymore. If you go to Togo, I went last time to visit my family, and then I visited someone, and the young doctor was hearing the music someone was playing 2 weeks before in Cologne. So people are thinking at the same level, actually. So we need just to see, for the African countries, what are the priorities, and we define them. Because someone who is there through the mondialization is also able now to copy, to see what is happening elsewhere. But how should we organize this mutation from the old world to the new world? We spoke about the laws. So Africa, the African society is based on laws, but archaic laws. So now how can we move from there to the modernity, to modern laws system, so that people can also feel comfortable and help developing their country? This is the biggest challenge.
Mr. Sif, you wanted to...
Yeah, I'll push back a bit the subject to colonization, because I relate to that problem in Sudan too, because during the colonization in Sudan, we had a centralized governance. So the capital, all the politicians, if I can say, were centralized in the capital, and then from there to the other states. So again, this problem is still there. All the, if I can say, the change or modernization or civilization is happening on the capital in certain regions, and the other states are marginalized and ignored. So we have a true problem of resources allocation. I mean, people don't cause conflicts without reason. They're just pushed by their instinct to survive. They want to eat. They won't fight if they weren't hungry. So again, it's resources allocation, and the problem, or the good thing, or the hope is that the youth are becoming aware. Mm-hmm. They know what they want, they know where they want to go, and they want to be part of the change. So as you mentioned, moving to modernization is a problem, but again, and as Dr. Andrea said, it's not just the politicians, it's a 50-50. It's like a teacher and a student. A teacher should do his job, but the student should study too. So the politicians should do their job, but I mean, if there is no reaction from the people, then the change is not going to happen. So again, as I mentioned earlier, recently there was a revolution in Sudan, led by the youth. So what you hope to see then is that finally those people are fighting for themselves, and fighting for their country, and fighting for the future. Nobody wanted to go to Europe or another country, African country. I mean, if you don't have a link with this place, there is no drive for you to make it better. Yes. So the reaction of the politicians, I mean, the right one you would expect is, okay, those people now are aware, those people know what they want, now we can work. Yeah, but the reaction is now again to oppress them, to take them back to if I can say, their seats, and the politicians are just looking for more room to, again, benefit, or more room to corruption, or more room to just look at themselves regardless of the other people. So again, and there's the point you mentioned, again, some African countries are still having their curriculums studying about the history of US, history of Europe. Nobody's really learning about their countries. How can I work for my country if I don't know anything about my country? If I don't know my identity, if I don't know why am I working for this place to get better, who I'm working for? Yeah. So yeah, it's now kind of a copy attitude. They just see the Japan, they see Europe, and they just want to copy everything in Africa, thinking this is civilization, this is the way to move forward. Mm. But as you mentioned before, and the beer discussion, I mean, the guy knew that they could put the beer and the car problem will be solved. So they know their, if I can say, environment, they know how to make it better, and they just want to do that themselves. So I think that it's time for politicians to give them that chance to express themselves, rather than the politicians trying to bring experts from abroad to work in the country they know nothing about, and they have no real benefit of working there. Yeah.
So it's both then, in a way. It's on the one hand the kind of mindset, what you mentioned, Professor Wrobel-Leipold, is a colonization of the mind, or of the thought, and then on the other hand, a very basic, everyday knowledge in comparison to these thought processes. Dr. Nguyen, I saw you raised your arm, so I don't want to let you out of this discussion.
Thank you very much for all the inputs. I just want to add that yes, while today African leaders should take responsibility, advocate for that very strongly. Why Africans themselves, and say in my situation, Cameroonians themselves, should be able to take responsibility. I will still link up to the fact that Africa, Cameroon, all these are countries and continents within the global setting. And within this global setting, the the international organizations, be it the UN, be it the African Union, be it the European Union, and be it the independent rich countries of high levels of democracy, I think that they still owe Africans, they still owe Cameroonian or Cameroonians, and they owe them the responsibility to be able to um, raise their concerns, to be able to call their governments to order, to be able to address their problems. So I think the concern I'm having is that the international bodies are not taking enough responsibility, or are not giving, in my situation, the crisis in my country, the kind of attention that I think it should deserve. So it is not enough to say that yes, colonialism is out of this, but we live in a global world, and what happens in one country affects the other. But more so, there are other countries that are stronger than others, and they are members of international unions, and those unions that advocate for human rights, advocate for equal opportunities, and all that should be able to give attention to the concerns of this country, and particularly that of Cameroon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I look at the clock, and I think we are at a time where we can open up the discussion to questions from, now that we have an audience again, we can open up the discussion to the audience if there are questions from the audience. No questions? Wouldn't have thought that something like this could even happen. Christian Schneider is in the house and there's no question. Okay, yeah.
He needed a little push.
Thank you, Alan, for this very interesting contributions from all sides. Now, we hear a lot of challenges, but what would be the solution? What can be done from within the country, and what can one do? Like Nesma said, Mrs. Adil said, very picturesque. The African people are the bricks of the house, and so what can the brick do to finish up the house and make it a palace? Question to everybody.
Okay, who wants to answer?
Okay, I'll answer.
Yeah.
So, if you went back to the house, so I'll go back to the house too. Before you build the walls, you actually dig the ground to put the basics. And actually, I think that's where we should go, the basics of the problem. And for me, personally, it always goes back to education. So in Sudan, for example, we still have 50% illiterate females and 30% illiterate males. So again, people still don't have the awareness of the importance of education. So I think really we should go back to the basics. We should have better curriculums that relate to the country. We should have a oriented education. If you know that you want farmers, then that's the oriented education. You have to produce farmers. So everything should go back to the basics and like a step back to see the roots of the problem.
And you also told me when we discussed before that the teaching style is something that really very much concerns you. Can you elaborate a little on that?
Yeah.
What's behind that?
If I can say educational manners, if I can say that it's the same. I mean, it's not in Sudan that the teachers actually have the minimum wages. So they're not motivated to do their job. They don't have enough training to do their job. So that's for me where the problem is. So.
But this is also the driving force for you, if I understood you correctly, to become a teacher even and
Yes.
to change this, so that there is,
Yeah. So basically, my interest is the educational system, and so again, as you said, like I'm sorry, as I mentioned, is that the teachers teach in the same manner. They take a book, they take a chalk, they write lines, students have to copy, they say the same things they say every year, and that's how it happens, like, since I can remember. I'm a master's graduate, I have a master's degree, and from elementary, or let's say kindergarten, until I got my bachelor's degree. So that's 8 years in elementary, 3 years in high school, and 5 years in university. I was taught by many different people, but they were teaching the same way. Mm-hmm. There was no creativity, there's no extracurricular activities, there's nothing, just basically academic and the same way. We have written exams, there are no other option, no oral exams, nothing. So everything is the same, strictly, I mean. And it really blocks the creativity of the students too. If the teachers are doing the same thing, then the students are doing the same thing, the parents are revising the lessons with their kids the same way. So there is no room for creativity, and I think they're kind of killing the spirits of the students that way. The kids come very energetic, very hungry for knowledge, and then they just get stuck on the system. Okay. And that's what you produce finally, people who have no creativity, no drive, like nothing. Yeah.
Actually, we have a teacher on the panel. Dr. Ngwa, can you relate to that? Of course, you are a different kind of teacher. I can really imagine that.
Thank you very much. I'm a teacher, and I've been teaching in secondary school for over 25 years or so. I must say that teaching in my country is a bit more dynamic, and maybe as an individual, based on the experiences I've had. I'll also say that teaching is a bit worrying when you don't teach at the right level. teaching at the right level is very important, because when you teach at the right level, then you're able to transmit the knowledge onto your learners in the way that they too can understand. Um, it is important to note that the teaching, and particularly the curricula that has informed teaching in most of our institutions, has been maybe the issue of Eurocentrism comes in again, had been defined from that perspective. Increasingly, Africans and Cameroonians get to know what their needs are, and it becomes necessary for a revision of most syllabuses or curricula. And it is therefore important that we do teaching based on competencies. It is also important that we can do teaching, which is continuous hands-on teaching, so that even the persons who are in the community who have been to know classroom where they learn even A, B, C, can also still be taught one way or the other, such that the teaching is relevant. I'm talking about this, trying to address the teaching and the education that we have in most of Africa and Cameroon. The question is, do students have access to this education? One. Two, is that education, um, yes, it is available. Do they have the access? And thirdly, whether how relevant is the education or the curricula to the African, to her own development and to the country's development. So we need to revise, especially our curriculum, to be able to address the local needs of the population, while equally situating them within the global context. Teaching should therefore be such that it meets um, the minds or the 21st century mind. So they should be able to do some critical thinking. They should be able to do some team building. They should be creative. They should be innovative, such that the teaching can bring relevance and transform the minds and transform their economies. So teaching and education, of course, remain key, and we can only insist and must insist that that teaching should be done at the right level, and that teaching should be such that is relevant to the persons, to the learner, and to the community. And I think the teaching should now focus more on participatory teaching. I think that's one thing that um, it's absent in some places. Like the example she gave, the teacher will come and read the book and all that, as though the candidate or the student has no prior knowledge or no mind set of her own and cannot contribute. Today we are talking about competency-based. We're talking about participatory teaching, where you tickle the mind of the learner so that the learner can contribute to whatever the one is learning, and you can equally value and exploit um, what skills the learner has, which are hidden, and build on them. Thank you very much.
Well, some of our students may also relay, yeah, Dr. Ananou.
I think on the teaching, sometimes I have the impression that the governments, they do it at purpose, because they want to keep the population in that situation. If they are better educated, they will understand more. So it's not for interest for them to reorganize, to reform the whole system, so so that people are better educated. Another point is more important for me. It is the preschool education, the education of the children at home before they go to school. So in most of the societies in Africa, so the rules are predefined, girls and boys. So it's the same here, but in another way. So it's so defined that women who have more responsibilities in the management of the society, they don't have this right. And girls, they don't have the right to go early to school at the same time as boys. I think we need to do more there and explain to the populations. I know it's the job of the government to take care of this by changing the mentality. So we know that girls, women, they are supposed, through the definition of the role, they are supposed to be at home and serve the whole society. It's not good. If we can change the foundation of the society by changing that role, so we will see more women coming up, we will see more women having the chance to have capacity building. In my program, for example, I have to go to some of the families and negotiate with the husband, with the family, that the young scientists, women, female scientists, can go about and get capacitated. It's incredible. That's something like that is still happening. But it's related to the definition of the role of the woman and of the girl in the society, and this needs to change. If we don't do that, we can change. We can do any reform in the teaching process. We can do all. We can change all the curricula at the schools, at the universities. But if we don't change the foundation of the rules of the society, it will be difficult.
Yeah, if there's an Arabic saying that a mother is a school. So if you taught or developed the mother, then you're reaching out for generations to come, or you're teaching out generations to come.
Exactly.
So I think, yeah, it's really that's a really important point.
Thank you. With regard to time, I'd like to ask Julia, are there any questions from the social media so far?
Yes, there are actually two questions, and the one is actually fitting very well now, because we are just, Mr. Ananou just talked about this topic. It's actually, this question was posed to Mrs. Ngwa, and it's what are special challenges for women when looking at perspectives for Africa's youth?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I missed it. What are the challenges?
What are special challenges for women when discussing perspectives for Africa's youth?
The challenges for women. Okay, thank you very much. Like the professor said, they just said, talking about women in education, it is quite an issue. When we look at gender-based violence, one of them is denial of resources amongst many. And these resources can be the fact that this young girl is deprived of education. And once you're deprived of education, then what happens is that your opportunities are limited. I just share this very quickly, which I've shared everywhere, that I'm a daughter of of a woman who had to want to go to school, but was taken out of the classroom. We're talking about the 1950s here in Cameroon. She was taken back out of the classroom to home, and she was told, girls do not go to school. There is no future for a girl child in education, and that she should go home and work so that her brothers could go to school. And so she was kept home and she never went to school. And years down the line, when her mother started seeing women participate in politics, participate as teachers in the community, and then she started regretting. And my mom said to herself, I didn't go to school, all my children will go to school. I will work so hard to make sure that they get to where they really will want to and can get. So mainstreaming gender in education is very important. The cultures around deprive the women from going to school because they're expected to be home and serve the community. And these same women who do not go to school turn out to be mothers, and mothers who are illiterate, and that has a very great impact on the development of the future generations. So our cultures, yes, need to be addressed, and aspects of them which are repugnant to justice, like depriving them of education, it's very important for revision. Um, when women don't go to school, it means that their contribution to productivity is limited. It means that women's practical needs, yes, can be met. They'll provide for them electricity at home, they'll provide for them water at home to be able to wash clothes and cook food. But then their strategic needs, which means that they cannot be transformed from just being caregivers to being contributors to growth. So I very much buy the idea and stating that um, there is a problem when women don't go to school. It is a problem in Africa. But I must also add that increasingly things are changing. Um, Many years back, it was when I got to the university, and for example, when I started staying around the University of Buea here, when it started in 1993, statistics will show us that at the beginning you had about the 40-60% representation of female male in the university. And as of today, we are talking about a 50 plus women's representation and less than 50 for the men or for the male. So that changes. It's also to highlight the fact that we remain a gap between male and female representation in core sciences. Um, with the male in favor of the male population. However, there has been an increasingly, you have many more young girls daring into traditionally stipulated or traditionally perceived um, subject areas. Like you get more girls moving into science, into technology, into physics and all of that. So I will advocate strongly for the fact that having to address women and the culture is very important for us to attain some level of growth. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay. Does anyone want to respond, or shall we have the second question? Second question, please. Okay.
The second question is for Mr. Ananou. What is your wish for Africa for the future?
My wish for Africa is total independence, in the sense that when representatives of Africa go to international places, to international conferences, so that they are also in the position and they are also capable to articulate a message which is their own and which is important for them to show the place of Africa in the new world. But we have gone now through most of the challenges, and to get there, it will be necessary to start by reforming the society, by producing a sane environment to the populations to grow, and by thinking about the redistribution of resources to the entire population or part of the population, and by giving the basics for life to population: water, medical services, food, because food is the central challenge in some of the society, in some of the countries, when people they don't have enough to eat, so there cannot be peace. So if we do all those reforms step by step, by taking time to prepare the solutions jointly, experts from Europe, from US, and from Africa together, I think, I don't know if I will be here to see the results, but it will be a good step in the right direction.
Okay.
I agree perfectly.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree, and I can totally relate to what he's saying. I mean, what you want to see is, for example, back in my country, those basics needs, I mean, like water, power, electricity, and the health system. I mean, if you didn't provide those things, which are the basics, then for development, then people will always think of those basics of what will I eat tomorrow, what would I do if I got sick, my children. So if you didn't solve those problems, or if you didn't provide those basics, their thinking will still be trapped in those if I can say, like trivial things, because this shouldn't be the focus of the Africans. Everyone should, again, have a room to grow, and a room to achieve more than just worrying about what am I gonna feed my children tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Nguyen, you also wanted to add something? I saw you raising your voice.
Now, just going to add to what Mr. Ananou just said about the wish for Africa, Africa being independent. It is very important for Africa to be independent, and it rests with the African leaders taking the right decision and um, taking and being determined to take the decision to be independent. I was running through some videos, and I got really when I understood that the the African Union structure is built by China. Yes, while it is true that you want to get your receiving aid, then it is also said that he who pays the piper dictates the tune. And to understand that the African building was bought electronically just shows how dependent Africa and African leaders are. And when it was discovered, it was just okay to say that, oh, we are sorry, we are going to take out these connections, we are sorry that happened. And it is about time African leaders and Africans take responsibility to know what they want to receive as aid and what they don't want to receive as aid. And I think that when you decide what you want to receive as aid, why it might be difficult, the donor who is ready to go with your agenda will provide that aid. And when it comes with strings and agendas of of the donor, then it becomes problematic. So I go with Mr. Ananou about the fact that African leaders should take responsibility and get Africa independent. Truly, we wish and look forward to that day, even when we become ancestors. Thank you.
Okay, these are almost closing remarks, but we have 2 or 3 more minutes. So I want to ask whether there is anything else in the social media. No social media. Are there any questions from the audience here? No more questions here. So, Kristen, huh? How could I? Professor Schneider, please.
So we heard now a lot about what should be done. Maybe maybe you can comment a bit on the burden of infectious diseases and how that is challenging the economy in a way that developing a sustainable economy that actually is not further burdening the environment and a further consequence, the climate change plays a role, and how to deal. How can infectious diseases be there, and how much is it in the African heads that this is really the number one problem, and not of the politicians, but on Mr. and Mrs. Average.
Okay. Who wants to answer the infectious diseases question? Is this something for you, or?
Yeah, the situation is very simple. If you don't have a healthy population, you cannot drive the development of the country. We know that when we are sick, we don't give the same performance as we should. And in some of the countries, a big part of the population is sick. People are not having drinkable water. People are not having good food. They are not healthy, so they cannot perform properly. And those people are the ones who are supposed to drive the economy of the country, who are supposed to work many hours per day and bring good performance, good statistics for the country. It's not possible. In most of the countries, they don't have a politic for sanitation. They don't have politic for medical care. And what is very astonishing is that big organizations like WHO, they encourage the countries in the mistake. Because the more they have a sick part of the population, the more money they get from those organizations. So this is what we are seeing also with COVID. If you go now to Africa, some of the countries, they don't have a high level of infections. But they declare intentionally that they have more so that they can get money from abroad. So this is a very, very tricky situation. But once again, I'm going back to the point of the responsibility. If you have responsible people, responsible leaders, and this is the case in some of the countries in Africa, it is there. If you have more of those good leaders who are thinking about their population, are thinking about the development of their country, I think that the growth of the continent will speed up, will be better, and we will see significantly what is going to come. Sometimes we from Europe are also doing the mistake because we want to be present, we want to be visible on the ground. We want to enter into competition with China. But I'm very sorry to say this, but the pressure of the population makes the situation very, very difficult for the government. So they are ready to accept any kind of aids to solve and to feed their population. And we enter in this competition with them. And we are not anymore seeing the development of the countries or of the population. We are only seeing our own interests. It is in the move. It's changing because our partners on the ground, they don't accept those kind of behaviors anymore. But it will take time, but we need to do more in that sense, and this will be great for the development of the continent. If we don't do that, we must be ready to receive the migrants coming every year. through the Mediterranean, and they will arrive. We cannot stop them. We will do everything to do that, and we will do everything to stop it, but we cannot hold them back in Africa. Once they have crossed the Sahara, so they are already there. They are close to us.
Okay. Thank you.
I will just add.
Yusuf.
Yeah. So the thing about Africa is that the infectious diseases prevalent there are actually the poverty-related disease, malaria, HIV, tuberculosis. So yes, again, the solution, again, the leaders should take responsibility, and I think that, again, takes us back to education, because an educated person, I mean, like when you know, will, how can I say it, better at taking care of themselves, better at like thinking straight, and then like find aims and then just go to achieve them. So for me, of course, the solution to poverty is education. The solution, of course, the illiteracy is education. The solution for to have an economic development is, again, education. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we almost come to a close. And
I think
is there a question? Another question? Yes. Yes, sir. Please.
Yeah. My question will center around political instability and corruption. So I want to ask that, is there a way in which partnership between Europe and Africa can end political instability and corruption without a kind of second colonialism?
Okay. Who wants to answer that? How could the fight for against corruption and democracy not get into a second form of colonialism?
It's a very deep-rooted problem, because you should know that politicians, they are corrupt because of selfishness, of course, but corruption also stems from the fact that if you are the man in power, your relatives, your friends, everybody is expecting that you are giving something to them because they in turn gave you something before. So it's a give and take. And if you as an African politician would say, no, I won't take any bribes, I will be absolutely non-corrupt, I think your relatives will turn against you and they'll tell you, well, we financed your studies, we gave you the money that you could go to America or somewhere else, we made you a big man, and now you are so ungrateful, shame on you. And if you turn your back to your relatives in Africa, it's comparable to an European who ends all his insurances, who drops out of social insurance, and who stands on his own. And that's impossible. So if you want to end corruption, you have to alter the social structure, and what family is doing in Africa is done in Europe by bureaucracies, by insurance companies, and so on. And what do you want? Do you want a family system that works, that is helpful, that shows solidarity, or do you prefer an anonymous bureaucracy?
Okay.
I think to solve the issue, the youth in Africa has the possibility through elections to put a sanction. If you are young, you can vote, and you know that your political leaders are not or are corrupt, you have to use your vote during the election to put a sanction. This is the only option I can see to solve the issue, by keeping the great family ties, but also putting a system in place which will will help to change the system by eliminating partly corruption. I totally agree with the definition. In Africa, what we call here corruption is not automatically corruption there because of the societal ties. But accepting resources illegally or selling the natural resources of the country illegally and keep the money on his own portal or in an account abroad. This is what should not happen anymore. And young people in the countries, they have the opportunity through election to show the red card.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I think we come to the end of our panel discussion. And if I think about it, there were two concepts that were reappearing again and again. One was relevance in regard to which kind of education that African countries should see what is relevant for them in the first place when we talked about agriculture or whatever. And the second one was responsibility. Responsibility on all levels of society, not only in politicians, but also in families with mothers and fathers, as you said, like the first part of the education, the first school is your mother or something like that. So those were the two concepts appearing and reappearing again. And I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank Dr. Ngwa from Cameroon, Mrs. Youssef, Professor Wrobel-Leipold, and also Gabin Ananou. Thank you very much.
Come in,